All right, guys. We are looking at the last part of Chapter 2 today. Now, the note sheets that y'all have is a more in-depth look at what we're doing. It's just going into it in a deeper kind of sense. Well, actually, let me say deeper in quotes. Because when you do the assignment, you will essentially be doing all of these steps. You won't necessarily be writing out all these steps in the form in which we have them. Because a lot of these here are essentially questions you're going to be asking yourself, or you're asking them and writing them down, but you're not going to write them in this exact format, okay? And they're not going to appear up here in this format either. Now, what we're doing is we're going back to finding the equations with these two sets here. The first one is vertex form. Y equals a parentheses x minus h squared plus k. And when we're finding these here, this equation in this form is whenever we're given the vertex and a point on the graph. If we're given the vertex and a point on a graph, we'll be using this equation. Now, if we're given the equation y equals a parentheses x minus p times x minus q, this is our x-intercept form. And we'll be using this when we're given two x-intercepts, or the two x-intercepts, and a point on the graph. Now, I used x3, y3 because, again, our x-intercepts could be the point p, could be given as the point x1, 0, and x of 2, 0. Because we know that it's going to be 0 because whenever the graph crosses the x-axis, the value of y is always 0. So we really could be given 3 points. But we know that the y values for the two x-intercepts are going to be 0. And we're going to use this information to find the equation of the parabolas. Now, the first example we look at, they tell us that the vertex is 3, 2, and it passes through the point 13, 8. Now, step number 1, what type are we given or going to use? Which type of equation are we going to use? Y equals a times x minus h squared plus k, or y equals a times x minus p times x minus q. Which one of those two are we going to use? You don't know? Well, we will have y equals because they both have that. But which one of those two would we use? Y equals what? Plus k. Well, why do we know this one? It gave us a vertex and a point. Well, that's the one that uses a vertex and a point, yes? Because y equals a times x minus h squared plus k. What is that? That is vertex form. It is the vertex form of a parabola. Vertex is h comma k. Well, we have h and k. We can plug it in. So what are the variables we're using for this here? Well, we're using the variables a, h, and k. We do have x and y, but x and y are actually a part of the equation. Now, do we know the values of any of these variables? Well, we know what h is. H is 3. What is k? 2. What's the one that we do not know? A. And that's the one we're going to be finding. That's the one we're going to be finding. Now, are there any questions on this so far? Are there any variables we need to solve for? And if so, do. So really what we have at this point is that y is equal to a times x minus what? Well, h is 3 squared plus 2. So on 4, we can write that down. Because because all we've done at this point here is filled in the values of h and k. Well, the one variable that we're missing is a, yes? Now, what's the only piece of given information that we have not used yet? The point, isn't it? Because we used the vertex already to get h and k. Now, it says that this parabola passes through the point 13, comma 8. So that means that is a point on the graph, yes? So if I plug 13 in for x and simplified this entire side out, the value of y would be what? 8. Because if I plug 13 into the equation, the value of y is 8. X is our input, y is our output. So no matter what the value of a is, when I plug 13 in for x, the value of y would be 8. Well, we can use that to actually find out what a is. Because if y is 8, when x is 13, and I plug that in, what's the only variable left? A, because x and y are already gone. Now the only variable I have left in the equation is a. So we can use that point to solve for the value of a, and then plug it back in. Well, 13 minus 3 is? Well, 10 squared is 100, and we would have times a plus 2. What would we need to do next to solve for a? Subtract 2 or minus 2 from both sides, which tells me that 6 is equal to divide both sides by 100. A is equal to, well, 6 divided by 100 will not reduce completely because obviously 6 is way smaller than 100. Yes? But is there a common factor between 6 and 100? 2. So we can reduce 6 down to, and 100 reduced down to 50. And we can leave it as this here. If you want to turn it into a decimal, you can. Because that would be 0.06 as a decimal. Or we can leave it as 3 over 500. Any questions on how we got the value of a? So the equation that we started with to find a was y equals, well, a times x minus h squared plus k. Well, we know what a is now. It's 3 over 50 parentheses x, what, minus squared plus. Do I have the equation of the parabola? So that's it. That's all we have to do for this here. Now, if we wanted to write it as a decimal, we could. It would just be y equals 0.06 parentheses x minus 3 squared plus 2. Because it should give us the exact same thing. Any questions on any of this here? We're ready to look at the next one. Example 2, the vertex is -5, 9, and it passes through the point -7, -15. Well, we're given what? So we're going to use y equals a parentheses x minus h squared plus k. We're using the vertex form because they gave us the vertex. Well, the variables that we're looking for or working with are a, h, and k. because those are the three that we have. Well, what do we know the values of? Well, h is, and k is. So those are the two variables that we do know. Now, when we're solving a problem like this on the homework, are we really going to need to list out that we're using the values of a, h, and k, or what h and k equal? I mean, no. Because again, this here is just for the notes so that y'all can see the connections here. There's really what we could say is, well, what? Y equals a parentheses x minus h. Well, h is -5. So what would I write here? X what? Plus 5 squared plus 9, because the negative and negative make a positive. So, I mean, on the homework, we really could have gone from here to here. We don't really need steps 2 and 3. I'm doing them in here so that y'all can see how they connect. So really, at this point, all we're missing is the value of a, yes? To find a, we're plugging in the point -7, -15 for x and y to solve for the value of a. So this here would be 15 is equal to a parentheses -7 plus 5 squared plus 9. Well, is this whole thing here just a number? Parentheses -7 plus 5 close parentheses squared? Do I have to actually do this -7 plus 5 and see what that is and then square it? Did I just type that in? Yeah, we can type that in just as we see it. We don't have to go, okay, well, -7 plus 5 is -2. And -2 squared is 4. Well, I can just type that in, parentheses. Huh? Yep. And the number that comes out of these parentheses, will it always be positive, or could it be positive or negative? Or always negative? It's always going to be positive because I'm squaring whatever that number is, yes? Because if it's a negative and I square it, it becomes positive. If it's positive, it's going to stay positive. And I say that just in case because I know that the calculators do have that nice little square button. Because if you just do, you just got to make sure to be careful that you don't type it in just like this here, because it'll tell you that it's 19. Because without the parentheses, what it's going to do is take -7 plus 5 squared. Well, 5 squared is 25, plus -7 would be 18, not 19, but it wouldn't do it right. So if you type it in with the parentheses, it'll give you 4. So we could just type that in. Now, what would we do next? Subtract 9 from both sides, which will tell us 4a is equal to -24. And then last but not least, which tells us a is equal to So our equation would be y equals what? Parentheses. Questions on this here? We like this here? Any other questions on this problem here before we look at the next one? Let's look at the next one. Well, hold on. Okay. So this one here, we're still using the y equals a times x minus h squared plus k. Well, what are we given? The x-intercept. So would we still use that same equation? No. A times x minus p times x minus q. Yes, because this is the equation when we have the x-intercepts. It is in the intercept form. Now, well, step 2, what variables are we using? A, p, and q. Well, we do know the values of p and q. What is the value of p? What do y'all think? What is p? Okay. Does anybody disagree with the -7? Could it be -3? Because here, we're doing x minus p and x minus q, yes? Can I multiply any two things in any order? So does it really matter which one I pick as p and which one is q? No. Because we can say one of them is -7, the other is -3. Because no matter which one I plug it in, we can flip them either way. One of them is going to be p, one of them is going to be q. And well, just like before, we can plug it in. Y equals times, well, x minus -7 is x, and then we'd have x, because we can have it as a times x plus 7 times x plus 3, or it could be a times x plus 3 times x plus 7, because we can flip those and get the same thing. So really, defining what p and q are really isn't important. It's just knowing that those are going to go in the place of p and q. Well, now we need to find the value of. How can we do that? We can plug in our point. Because again, that point still holds true. It is still on the graph. So when x is -2, y is going to be 0.05 is equal to a times -2 plus 7 times -2 plus 3. Because that property is still going to hold true even though that we have the equation in a different form. We can say 0.05 is equal to a times, well, -2 plus 7 is 5, 1. Well, a times 5 times 1 is just 5a. What can we do next? We can divide both sides by 5. .01. Any questions on how we found the value of a? So our equation would be y equals 0.01 times x plus 7 times x plus 3. That's it. Was that any real different than what we did when we had it in vertex form? No. The final equation looks different, but that's about it. As we plugged in what we knew from the vertex or the x-intercepts, used the point to find the value of a, then plugged it back in. Questions on this here? Let's do one last one. Let's see. Okay. Yep, it's decided to say no. This one didn't give me the x-intercepts, it just gave me the point of -16, 0 and -2, 0. They're still x-intercepts because the value of y at the x-intercept is always 0. So even though it didn't directly tell me that just x intercepts are these two values, it's still telling me that P and Q, whichever one we want to choose, is at negative 16 and at negative 2. And really what the x-intercepts are telling me, this is the value of x that makes y equal 0. And that's going to be important going down the line, because when we start the next chapter, or we start the chapter over quadratics and we start solving quadratics, we're really trying to find out what value of x will make y equal 0. So that will be here the x-intercepts are the solutions to the equations. They are our real zeros. So that also means, well, here, y is equal to a times x minus p times x minus q. Well, if we were actually doing this on the homework, what would y'all do next? Y equals a parentheses what? X because again, I wrote those other steps out just so that y'all can get the handle on it, but on the homework, I don't expect y'all to write all those steps out. Okay. And one more time. There we go. Well, the point is negative 1872. Plug it in. 72 is equal to a parentheses negative 18 plus 16 times negative 18 plus 2. And all that just a number? Is there any real point to doing both of those individually and then multiplying them together? Well, no, we can just type the whole thing in and let it do it for us. Because if we did it by hand, negative 18 plus 16 is negative 2. Negative 18 plus 2 would be negative 16. And if we multiply all that together, we should get 32a. But the calculator would have done it for us. Now what can we do next? Divide both sides by 32. 2.25 or 2 1/4 or 9/4. Any one of those would work. Now in an equation, one of those three that we wouldn't use, do y'all know which one it would be? Because have you seen decimals in equations? Well, yes. Fractions, improper fractions. No, we really stay away from using 2 1/4 in an actual equation. It just doesn't look well in the overall equation. So we stay away from impartial fractions. So in proper kind of notation, 2.25 would be correct. And then we would have x plus 16 times x plus 2. We could also say y equals 9/4 x plus 16 times x plus 2. We can have it in either one of these ways. The one way we would avoid using is the 2 1/4, because with most of these equations here, there is a good enough information in there to begin with, let alone putting an improper fraction. Or not improper fraction, a mixed number. We don't like using mixed numbers. 9/4 is an improper fraction, and that's fine. Questions on this here? Do we need to see another example of one of these? We ready to move on to what is next? So we're good with vertex and point. We're good with x-intercepts and point. And the only thing left is the assignment, which also means we are done with chapter 2. We are completely done with chapter 2. So the makeup day is not tomorrow. The makeup day will be on Monday. The review sheet I will give you on Tuesday. We will go over the review sheet on Wednesday, which means your test is on Thursday. Your test over this chapter is on Thursday, which also means all the homework is due by the end of the day, Thursday. By the end of the day, Thursday.